The gunshot echoed through the winter mountains just as Ethan Irons pulled his coat tighter against the biting wind. And he knew, without seeing, that someone was in trouble up ahead on the frozen trail. He urged his horse forward through the deepening snow, his breath forming white clouds in the December air of 1876. The Sierra Nevada mountains were unforgiving in winter, and Downeyville, California, lay another 5 miles behind him. He had been heading to his claim in the high country when the sound shattered the afternoon silence. What he found made his heart clench. A woman lay crumpled in the snow beside an overturned wagon, her dark hair spilling across the white ground like ink on paper. She was shivering violently, her lips tinged blue, her hands clutching at nothing. The horses that had pulled her wagon were gone, likely spooked by whatever had caused the accident. Blood stained the snow near her temple, and her dress was soaked through from the melting snow beneath her. Ethan dismounted in one fluid motion and knelt beside her. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, revealing frightened green eyes. "Cold," she whispered, the word barely audible. "So cold." He did not hesitate. Ethan scooped her into his arms, feeling how her entire body trembled against him. She was light, too light, and her skin felt like ice beneath his gloved hands. He carried her to a sheltered spot beneath a massive pine tree where the snow had not yet accumulated as heavily. The branches formed a natural canopy overhead, and the thick trunk would block the worst of the wind. "I am going to build you a fire," he said firmly, laying her down on his bedroll that he quickly spread across the ground. "You are going to be all right. Do you understand me?" She managed a tiny nod, her teeth chattering so hard she could not speak. Ethan worked with practiced efficiency, gathering deadwood from beneath the tree where it had stayed relatively dry. His hands moved quickly, building a proper fire circle with stones he dug from beneath the snow. He pulled out his flint and steel, coaxing sparks into the nest of dried bark and grass he always kept in his saddlebag for emergencies. Within minutes, flames began to lick at the kindling, and he carefully fed larger pieces of wood into the growing fire. The woman had curled into a ball, still shaking. Ethan pulled off his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around her, then added his spare blanket from his pack. He built the fire higher, letting the heat radiate toward her. Only when he was satisfied that the flames would hold did he finally look at her properly. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with delicate features and skin that would have been fair if it were not currently pale with cold. The wound on her temple had stopped bleeding, but it would need cleaning. Her dress, though soaked and muddy, had once been fine quality, the kind a respectable woman from town would wear. What was she doing out here alone? "What is your name?" he asked gently, crouching beside her. Violet," she managed through chattering teeth. "Violet Zimmerman. I am Ethan Irons. Can you tell me what happened?" She closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she might have lost consciousness, but then she spoke. "My father, we were traveling from Sacramento. He wanted to reach Downeyville before the worst of winter set in. We hit something in the road. The wagon flipped. He was thrown clear, but he landed wrong. His neck." The words trailed off, but Ethan understood. He had seen the body on the other side of the wagon, partially covered by snow. He had not mentioned it, hoping she had not seen. "I am sorry," he said quietly. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, but she was still shaking too hard to properly cry. "I tried to stay with him. I did not know what else to do. The horses ran off. I heard wolves in the distance. I fired his pistol to scare them away, but then I just got so cold. I could not feel my hands anymore." Ethan examined her hands in the firelight. Her fingers were white and stiff, classic signs of frostbite beginning to set in. He needed to warm her gradually, not too quickly, or the damage could be worse. He pulled off his gloves and began to gently rub her hands between his own, trying to restore circulation. "We need to get you warmer, but carefully," he said. "Frostbite is dangerous. Can you move your toes?" She tried, wincing. "Barely." He pulled off her wet boots, noting that her stockings were soaked through as well. Without asking permission, because her life depended on it, he removed the wet stockings and wrapped her feet in a dry shirt from his pack, then positioned them closer to the fire. She did not protest, which told him how desperate her situation was. For the next hour, Ethan worked to save her life. He heated water from his canteen in his tin cup over the fire and made her drink it slowly, warming her from the inside. He kept the fire fed and hot, creating a cocoon of warmth in their little shelter. He rubbed circulation back into her hands and feet, watching the color gradually return to her skin. The shivering began to subside, replaced by a heavy exhaustion that worried him almost as much. "Stay awake, Violet," he urged. "Talk to me. Tell me about your father. What brought you to California?" She struggled to keep her eyes open. "He was a banker in Philadelphia, lost everything in the panic of '73, heard there were opportunities out west. Wanted to start over in Downeyville. Said it was a good town, still had some gold, still had hope." "It is a good town," Ethan agreed. "Small but honest folk for the most part. I have a claim up in the mountains. Been working it for 3 years now. It is not much, but it is mine." "Do you find gold?" she asked, her voice stronger now. "Some. Enough to keep going. Mostly I find peace. After the war, that was worth more than gold to me." She looked at him with new understanding. "You fought for the Union, saw things no man should see." "When it was over, I could not go back to Ohio. Too many ghosts, so I came west like everyone else running from something." Violet nodded slowly. "My father was running too, from shame, from failure. He wanted to give me a better life than we had back east. Now he is gone and I am alone." "You are not alone," Ethan said firmly. "You are alive, and that is what matters right now. When you are strong enough, I will take you to Downeyville. You will be safe there." She met his eyes, and he saw something in her gaze that made his chest tighten. Trust. She was placing her life in his hands, and he felt the weight of that responsibility settle over him like a mantle. Night fell quickly in the mountains, and the temperature dropped even further. Ethan knew they could not travel in the dark, not with Violet in her condition. He built up the fire until it roared, creating a wall of heat between them and the frozen wilderness. He fashioned a windbreak from pine branches, making their shelter more secure. From his saddlebags he produced hardtack and dried venison, and he made Violet eat even though she said she was not hungry. "You need strength," he insisted. "Your body has been through trauma. Food will help," she obeyed, chewing mechanically. When she finished, she looked at him with questions in her eyes. "Why are you helping me? You do not know me. I am nothing to you." Ethan poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. "Out here we help each other or we die. It is as simple as that. Besides, I could not live with myself if I had ridden past and left you to freeze." "Most men would have," she said softly. "Then most men are fools." She smiled for the first time, just a slight curve of her lips, but it transformed her face. Even exhausted and injured, even grieving her father, she was beautiful. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced in years. Not since before the war, before he had learned to keep his heart locked away where it could not be hurt. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the wind moan through the trees. An owl hooted in the distance, and Ethan's horse stamped its feet, tied securely to a sturdy branch nearby. The animal had been trained for mountain winters and would be fine through the night. "Tell me about Downeyville," Violet said eventually. "What is it like?" Ethan settled back against the tree trunk, keeping the fire between himself and Violet to maintain propriety. It sits in a valley where two rivers meet, the Downey River and the North Fork of the Yuba. During the gold rush days, 20 years ago, it was wild and lawless. Thousands of miners tearing up the earth, saloons on every corner, more violence than any place should see. But it has calmed now. Maybe 200 people live there year-round. We have a general store, a hotel, a church, a school. The gold is harder to find, but some of us still work claims in the hills. "What will I do there?" Violet asked, and he heard the fear beneath the question. "I have no money, no family, no prospects. My father spent everything we had getting us this far." Ethan considered this. "Can you read and write?" "Of course. My father made sure I had a proper education." "Can you cook, sew, keep accounts?" "Yes, all of those things." "Then you will find work." "The school teacher, Miss Harriet, she is getting on in years. She might appreciate help. Or the hotel could use someone. Or you could hire on at the general store. Downeyville is not a rich town, but it takes care of its own. You will not starve, and you will not be turned out." Violet pulled his coat tighter around herself. "You make it sound almost hopeful." "I have learned that hope is something you build, not something you find lying around. You build it one day at a time, one choice at a time. You survive today. That is the first step." She studied him across the fire, her green eyes reflecting the flames. "You are not like other men I have known." "I will take that as a compliment." It was meant as one. They fell into a more comfortable silence after that. Ethan kept watch while Violet dozed fitfully, waking every so often with a gasp or a cry. Each time he spoke to her softly, reminding her where she was, that she was safe. He added wood to the fire religiously, never letting it burn too low. The night stretched long and cold, but they survived it together. When dawn finally broke, painting the snowy landscape in shades of pink and gold, Ethan went to check on the overturned wagon. He found Violet's father exactly where he had been the day before, frozen now in the night's cold. Ethan said a silent prayer over the body, then used the shovel from the wagon to dig as deep into the frozen ground as he could manage. It was not a proper grave, not really, but it was the best he could do under the circumstances. He marked it with stones and a cross made from 2 branches tied together with leather cord. When he returned to camp, Violet was awake and sitting up. She looked stronger, though grief had etched new lines around her eyes. "I buried him," Ethan said simply. Said words over him. "He is at peace now." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she nodded. "Thank you. I do not think I could have done it myself. You do not have to do everything yourself anymore." He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. Her feet were still tender from the frostbite, but she could walk. He salvaged what he could from the wagon, her trunk of belongings, some food stores, a few of her father's possessions that might be sold for money. Everything was tied to his horse, who bore the extra weight with patient resignation. "Can you ride?" Ethan asked. "I think so." He helped her into the saddle, then mounted behind her. With Violet settled against his chest and his arms around her to hold the reins, they began the journey to Downeyville. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked beneath his chin, and Ethan tried not to notice how right it felt to hold her. The ride took most of the day, going slowly to spare Violet's strength, and to ensure they did not slip on the icy trail. They stopped once to rest and eat, and Ethan checked her hands and feet for any worsening of the frostbite. She was healing, the danger past, though she would be sore for days. As they crested the final ridge and Downeyville came into view below them, Violet drew in a sharp breath. The town nestled in the valley like a child's toy set. Wooden buildings clustered along the riverbanks, smoke rising from chimneys into the clear winter air. Snow covered everything, turning it into a scene from a Christmas card. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "It is home," Ethan replied. They descended into town just as afternoon was fading into evening. Curious faces appeared in windows as they passed. A stranger in Downeyville was always news, and a woman riding with Ethan Irons was exceptional news. He could already imagine the gossip that would fly through town by morning. He stopped first at the hotel, a two-story building called the Riverview House. The proprietor, a stout woman named Martha Chen, whose father had come from China to work the mines, appeared in the doorway. "Ethan Irons, what have you brought me?" she asked, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "This is Miss Violet Zimmerman. She was in an accident on the mountain road, lost her father. She needs a room and care." Martha's expression softened immediately. "Come in, child. Come in out of the cold. Ethan, help her inside." He dismounted and lifted Violet down, carrying her when he felt her legs buckle. Martha led them to a room on the ground floor, small but clean, with a real bed and a stove already burning. Ethan set Violet on the bed as gently as if she were made of glass. "I will send for Doc Henderson," Martha said. "She should be looked at properly." "Thank you," Violet said, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked at Ethan, reaching for his hand. "Will you stay?" "I will be right here," he promised. Doc Henderson arrived within the hour, a gruff man in his 50s with gentle hands and a no-nonsense manner. He examined Violet thoroughly, cleaning the wound on her temple, checking her hands and feet, listening to her breathing. "You are lucky to be alive," he told her. "Another hour in that cold and we would be having a different conversation. As it is, you will recover fully. Rest, warmth, and food. That is the prescription. Give it a week before you try to do too much." After the doctor left, Martha brought up a tray of hot stew and fresh bread. Ethan started to leave to give Violet privacy, but she caught his sleeve. "Please," she said. "I do not want to be alone yet." So he stayed, sitting in the chair by the window while she ate. They talked of small things, the weather, the town, nothing of consequence. But beneath the words ran an undercurrent of something deeper, something neither of them was quite ready to name. Finally, when full dark had fallen and Violet's eyes were drooping with exhaustion, Ethan stood to go. "I will come by tomorrow to check on you. Promise." "I promise." He returned to his cabin on the edge of town, a small but sturdy structure he had built himself. It felt emptier than usual that night, and he found himself thinking of Violet's face in the firelight, the way she had trusted him so completely, the feel of her in his arms as they rode. He was in trouble, he realized. The kind of trouble that came from caring about someone, from wanting things he had long ago decided he would never have. But as he lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, he could not bring himself to regret it. The next morning, true to his word, Ethan appeared at the hotel with a bouquet of winter berries and pine branches, the only flora he could find in the frozen landscape. Violet was sitting up in bed, looking far better than she had the night before. Color had returned to her cheeks, and when she saw him, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "You came," she said, as if she had doubted. "I said I would." He handed her the makeshift bouquet, suddenly feeling foolish. "It is not much. It is perfect." She buried her face in the greenery, breathing in the scent of pine. "It smells like the forest, like being saved." Ethan pulled up the chair, settling in. "How do you feel today?" "Sore, sad, but alive. Thanks to you. You are stronger than you know." "You survived that night on your own before I found you." "Barely. If you had been an hour later," she shuddered, not finishing the thought. "But I was not. You are here, and you are going to be fine." Over the following days, Ethan visited Violet every morning and evening. He brought her books from the small lending library at the general store. He told her stories about the people in town, preparing her for when she was well enough to meet them properly. He brought her fresh milk from the dairy farm and eggs and whatever small treats he could find. In return, she told him about her life in Philadelphia, about growing up in a fine house before her father's troubles, about the friends she had left behind, about her mother who had died when Violet was just 16. She told him about her love of music and poetry, about her dream of teaching children someday, about her fear of being a burden in this rough frontier town. "You could never be a burden," Ethan said firmly. "You are educated, skilled, and brave. Any town would be lucky to have you." "You have a kind heart," Ethan irons. "I just tell the truth as I see it." By the end of the first week, Violet was well enough to leave her room. Martha Chen had taken a liking to her and offered her a position helping run the hotel in exchange for room and board plus a small wage. It was not much, but it was a start, and Violet accepted with gratitude. Ethan watched her bloom over the following weeks. She charmed the townspeople with her grace and education. The children adored her because she told them stories and helped them with their letters when they came to the hotel with their parents. The women appreciated her willingness to help with community projects, organizing a Christmas social, sewing quilts for needy families, teaching some of the rougher miners' wives how to read, and through it all, Ethan was there. He could not seem to stay away. He found excuses to be in town more often, to stop by the hotel, to cross paths with Violet at the general store or the church. They took walks together along the frozen river, their breath mingling in white clouds as they talked. He showed her the trails around town, always careful to keep her safe, always aware of her presence beside him like a constant warmth. One evening in late January, as they stood on the bridge overlooking the confluence of the two rivers, Violet turned to him with serious eyes. "Why have you not married, Ethan? A man like you should have a family." He looked out at the water, dark and swift below the ice. "The war took something from me. I came back different, harder. I did not think I had anything to offer a woman, so I did not try. And now—" He looked at her then, really looked at her and let her see what was in his heart. "Now I think I was just waiting for someone worth trying for." Violet's breath caught. "Ethan, I know it is too soon. I know you are still grieving your father. I know you probably think of me as just the man who helped you. But I need you to know, Violet Zimmerman, that you have become important to me, more important than I thought anyone could be." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "You are not just the man who helped me. You are the man who saved me, yes. But you are also the man who made me laugh when I thought I would never laugh again. The man who treats me like I have value and ideas worth hearing. The man who makes me feel safe and seen," and she paused, gathering courage, "and cherished." Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. "Are you saying—" "I am saying that I feel it too, this thing between us. I am saying that when I imagine my future now, you are in it. I am saying that I think I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure." He cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I will never hurt you. I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you." "You already are," she whispered. And then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Her lips were warm despite the cold, and she tasted like hope and home and everything good he had thought lost to him forever. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Violet was smiling through tears. "I was so cold that day," she said. "Cold and alone and ready to give up. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not even said. You built me that fire and you gave me a reason to keep living. You gave me a future." "We gave each other a future," Ethan corrected. "I was just going through the motions before you. Working my claim, existing, but not really living. You woke something in me I thought was dead. You made me want things again." They walked back to town hand in hand, and if people stared, neither of them cared. The next Sunday, they sat together in church, and the whole congregation buzzed with excitement. A romance was unfolding in their midst, and in a small town in a hard winter, it was better than any entertainment. Ethan began courting Violet properly. He took her to the monthly social dance at the town hall, where she wore a dress Martha had helped her sew from fabric Ethan had purchased at the general store. He taught her to ride so they could explore the mountain trails together when spring came. He introduced her to his few close friends, old miners who had known him since he first arrived, the blacksmith who sharpened his tools, the minister who had counseled him through dark nights of the soul. In turn, Violet introduced him to the softer aspects of life he had forgotten. She played the piano at the hotel when guests wanted music, and Ethan would sit and listen, mesmerized by the grace of her hands on the keys. She read to him from books of poetry, and he discovered he liked words when they came from her lips. She taught him to see beauty in small things, the pattern of frost on a window, the way light fell through the church windows, the sound of children laughing. As winter gave way to spring, the whole town watched their courtship with approval. In April, when the snow had melted and wildflowers carpeted the valley, Ethan took Violet on a ride up to his claim. It was the first time she had seen it, a modest operation with a cabin even smaller than his place in town, a creek running through the property, and the scarred earth where he had been working for 3 years. "It is not much," he said, suddenly nervous about what she would think. But Violet looked around with shining eyes. "It is beautiful. The mountains, the water, the freedom. I can see why you love it here. I want to show you something." He led her to a flat area near the cabin where the view stretched out over the valley below. "I was thinking, if things went the way I hoped they would, this would be a good place to build a proper house. Big enough for a family, with windows facing south to catch the light, a porch where we could sit in the evenings, a garden for vegetables and flowers." Violet turned to him, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Ethan, are you?" He dropped to one knee, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. He had panned for the gold himself, then paid the blacksmith to forge it into a ring. It was not fancy, but it was honest work from honest means. "Violet Zimmerman, you came into my life when I was not looking for anyone. You were broken and I was broken, and somehow together we started to heal. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your laugh. I love the way you see the world and the way you make me see it too. I want to build that house with you. I want to fill it with children and love and all the life we can cram into it. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, unable to speak. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and she pulled him to his feet and kissed him with all the passion they had been carefully restraining during their courtship. "Yes," she finally said when she could breathe. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. I love you, Ethan Irons. I want to build a life with you. I want to be your wife and the mother of your children and your partner in all things." They were married in June of 1877, in the little church in Downeyville, with the entire town in attendance. Violet wore a dress of white lace that the women of the town had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers picked fresh that morning. Ethan wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed, and he could not stop smiling. The minister, Reverend Thomas, spoke of love and commitment, of faith and partnership. But what Ethan remembered most was the moment Violet looked into his eyes and spoke her vows, her voice steady and sure. She promised to love him in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer. And he promised the same, meaning every word with his whole heart. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the congregation erupted in cheers. Ethan kissed his bride, and Violet kissed him back, and for a moment the whole world narrowed to just the two of them, to this promise they had made, to this future they would build together. The reception was held at the hotel, with food contributed by every family in town. There was music and dancing and toasts with apple cider, since Violet did not care for strong drink. Old miners told increasingly embellished stories about Ethan's arrival in town 3 years prior. Women gave Violet advice about married life, some of it useful, most of it amusing. Children ran wild with wedding cake on their faces. As evening fell, Ethan and Violet slipped away from the party. He had prepared his cabin in town for their first night as husband and wife, filling it with candles and wildflowers. They stood in the doorway together, and Ethan lifted Violet in his arms to carry her over the threshold. "Are you happy?" he asked, setting her down gently. "I did not know I could be this happy," she answered honestly. "That day in the snow I thought my life was over. But it was really just beginning. Our life," he corrected. "Everything from here is ours together." They made love that night with tenderness and passion, discovering each other's bodies with reverent touches and whispered endearments. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Violet traced the scars on Ethan's chest, remnants of the war he rarely spoke of. "These are part of you," she said softly. "Part of your story. Thank you for trusting me with all of you." He kissed her forehead. "You make the darkness lighter. You make the hard parts easier to bear." "That is what love does," she said. "It does not erase the pain, but it makes the weight more bearable." They fell asleep like that, wrapped together. Two people who had been lost and alone but had found their way to each other through snow and cold and the strange workings of fate. The next year passed in a blur of happiness. Ethan continued working his claim during the spring and summer months, and Violet often came up to stay with him for days at a time. She loved the solitude of the mountains, the quiet broken only by the sound of running water and birdsong. She kept the cabin clean, cooked meals over the small stove, and in the evenings they would sit on the porch Ethan built and watch the sun set over the valley. During the fall and winter, they lived in town where Violet continued her work at the hotel and became increasingly involved in the community. She started teaching reading lessons twice a week for anyone who wanted to learn, adults and children alike. She organized a women's sewing circle that became as much a social gathering as a productive one. She sang in the church choir and helped with charity work. Ethan watched her thrive with pride and amazement. This woman who had nearly died in the snow had become a pillar of their small community. She brought light wherever she went, and he was grateful every day that he had found her when he did. In the spring of 1878, Violet told him she was pregnant. Ethan received the news with a mixture of joy and terror. He had seen too much death, too much loss. The thought of something happening to Violet or the baby kept him awake at night, but Violet faced pregnancy with the same courage she faced everything else. "We cannot live in fear of what might happen," she told him. "We have to trust in God and each other and hope for the best." Doc Henderson kept a close eye on her throughout the pregnancy. The women of the town rallied around her, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and their own birth stories. Martha Chen declared she would be the child's honorary grandmother and began knitting tiny blankets and booties. Ethan began building the house he had shown Violet on his claim. Every spare moment he had, he was up there, cutting timber, laying foundation stones, raising walls. Other men from town came to help on weekends, as was the custom. By the time autumn arrived, the house was finished, a sturdy 2-story structure with 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a sitting room, and that south-facing porch Ethan had promised. They moved in just as winter set in, and Violet nested with determined energy despite her swelling belly. She made curtains for the windows, arranged furniture, and planned where the baby's cradle would go. Ethan installed a large stove that would keep the whole house warm and built a rocking chair where Violet could sit and nurse the baby when it came. On a cold night in December, exactly 2 years after the day Ethan had found her in the snow, Violet went into labor. Ethan rode like mad to fetch Doc Henderson and Martha Chen, then paced the floor of their bedroom while the women worked. He could hear Violet's cries of pain through the door, and each one felt like a knife to his heart. "This is normal," Doc Henderson assured him during one of his trips out to get more hot water. "She is strong. The baby is positioned well. Everything is progressing as it should." But Ethan could not shake his fear until, just after midnight, he heard a new sound, the lusty cry of a newborn baby. The door opened, and Martha appeared with a huge smile on her face. "You have a son," she announced. "A big, healthy boy, and your wife is tired but well. Come meet your child." Ethan entered the room on shaking legs. Violet lay in bed, pale and exhausted, but with a smile of pure joy on her face. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of Martha's handmade blankets. Ethan approached slowly, reverently, and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face. His eyes were closed, but his little mouth worked instinctively, seeking food. He was perfect. "Ethan, meet Samuel Thomas Irons," Violet said softly. "I thought we could name him after your father and Reverend Thomas who married us." Ethan could not speak past the lump in his throat. He reached out one finger, and the baby's tiny hand wrapped around it with surprising strength. In that moment, Ethan felt something shift in his soul. This was his son, his family, his future made flesh. "He is perfect," Ethan finally managed. "You are perfect. I love you both so much." "We love you too," Violet said. "My hero, my husband, my love." The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel grew into a sturdy, curious toddler with his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn chin. In 1880, a daughter was born, Grace Ann, named after Violet's mother. She was a quiet baby with serious eyes who seemed to study everything around her with intense concentration. Ethan's claim began producing better as he learned the land and found richer deposits. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable. Violet continued her teaching, now from their home, and children from town would make the trek up to the mountain house twice a week for lessons. The house filled with the sound of young voices reciting their letters and doing their sums. In 1882, another son arrived, Henry James, a loud and energetic baby who never seemed to stop moving. With 3 young children, life was chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Ethan often thought back to his younger self, the broken soldier who had come west seeking only solitude and peace. That man could never have imagined this life, this abundance of love and noise and responsibility. The town of Downeyville continued to evolve around them. Some families moved away as the gold became harder to find. Others arrived, seeking the same dream that had drawn Ethan and Violet's father before his death. The children grew older and started helping with chores. Samuel learned to work the sluice box alongside his father. Grace showed an aptitude for music and would spend hours at the piano. Ethan had bought and hauled up the mountain as a gift for Violet's 30th birthday. Henry was happiest outdoors, exploring the forest and creek with the boundless energy of youth. Ethan and Violet's marriage deepened over the years, the way good marriages do. They learned each other's rhythms and moods. They worked together through lean times and celebrated together during abundant ones. They made love with the comfortable passion of long familiarity, their bodies knowing each other as well as their souls did. On winter evenings, when the children were in bed and the house was quiet, they would sit together by the fire, just as they had on that first night when Ethan had saved Violet's life. Sometimes they talked about everything and nothing. Sometimes they sat in companionable silence. Sometimes Violet would read aloud while Ethan whittled or mended tools. "Do you ever regret it?" Violet asked one such evening in the winter of 1885. "Saving me that day, taking on a strange woman and all the complications I brought." Ethan looked at his wife, still beautiful at 32, with strands of silver just beginning to show in her dark hair, laugh lines around her eyes from years of smiling. "Regret you? Violet, finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You gave me a reason to be more than I was. You gave me a family and a purpose, and a joy I never thought I would have. My only regret is that I did not find you sooner." She moved from her chair to sit on the floor between his knees, leaning back against him. "I was dead that day, Ethan. My body might have had a little life left in it, but my spirit was gone. I had lost my father, lost everything, and I was ready to let go. But you would not let me. You built me a fire and kept me warm and gave me a reason to keep breathing. And then you gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined." He wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "We saved each other." "Yes," she agreed. "We did." As their children grew into young adults, Ethan and Violet began to think about their legacy. The claim still produced enough gold to support them, but they knew it would not last forever. They wanted to give their children options, opportunities, the education and skills to make their own way in the world. Samuel, at 16, showed interest in geology and mining engineering. Ethan arranged for him to apprentice with a mining surveyor in Sacramento for a year, giving him broader experience than Downeyville could offer. Grace, at 14, had a gift for teaching that reminded everyone of her mother. She began helping Violet with the younger students, and talk turned to sending her to a teaching college when she was old enough. Henry, at 12, could not decide what he wanted but showed aptitude for mechanics and was constantly taking things apart to see how they worked. In 1888, on their 11th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Violet with a trip to Sacramento. They left the children with Martha Chen, who was now in her 60s but still spry and delighted to spoil them. It was the first time Ethan and Violet had been alone together for more than a few hours since Samuel's birth. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants, saw a theater production, and shopped in stores far grander than Downeyville's general store. But what Violet remembered most was walking through the city park at twilight, hand in hand with her husband. "This is lovely," she said, "but I miss our mountains." "Me too," Ethan admitted. "I guess we are mountain people now. Downeyville is home in a way nowhere else could be." "It is where we found each other," Violet said. "Where we built our life, where our children were born. Yes, it is home." That night in their hotel room they made love with the privacy and abandon they could rarely enjoy at home. Afterward, wrapped in expensive sheets far softer than their own, Violet traced patterns on Ethan's chest. "Thank you for this," she said. "For everything. For the big things like saving my life and marrying me and giving me children, but also for the small things. For morning coffee made just how I like it. For fixing the porch step before I asked. For letting me teach our children to love books even though you would rather have them outside working. For being patient with Grace's music practice even when she was learning and it was painful to hear. For all of it. You do not have to thank me for loving you," Ethan said. "It is the easiest thing I have ever done." They returned home refreshed and reconnected, ready to face the challenges of raising teenagers and maintaining a homestead. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of mountain life, planting and harvesting, mining and processing gold, teaching and learning, growing and changing. In 1890, Violet's teaching school had grown enough that she hired a young woman from town to help her. Between them, they taught 20 children of various ages, and their little mountain school gained a reputation for excellence. Students who had learned under Violet went on to university, to professional careers, to lives beyond what their parents had dreamed possible. Ethan diversified his income, buying a small sawmill operation that processed timber from the surrounding mountains. It was hard work, but Samuel had come home from his apprenticeship full of ideas about modernizing their approach. Together, father and son built a business that employed several men from town and provided a steady income even as the gold began to run out. Grace fell in love with the blacksmith's son, a kind young man named Robert who had ambitions to become a veterinarian. They married in the summer of 1892, in the same church where Ethan and Violet had wed. And if Violet cried through the entire ceremony, they were tears of joy. Grace and Robert built a house in town near the blacksmith shop, and within a year, Violet and Ethan became grandparents to a baby girl named Virginia, for her grandmother. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Ethan was transported back to that snowy night when he had found Violet. Every choice he had made since that moment had led to this tiny life, this continuation of their story into the next generation. "What are you thinking?" Violet asked, watching his face. "That life is strange and beautiful," he said. "That I could have ridden past that day. That I almost did, because I was tired and cold and wanted to reach my cabin. But something made me stop. Something made me help you. And because of that choice, all of this exists." He gestured to encompass their home, their family, the life they had built. "I believe it was meant to be," Violet said. "I believe some things are written in the stars and we were always going to find each other, one way or another. Then I am grateful to the stars." Samuel married in 1894. Bringing home a sharp-minded woman named Catherine who had studied bookkeeping in San Francisco. She took over managing the finances for both the mining claim and the sawmill, bringing an efficiency that doubled their profits within a year. Samuel and Catherine built a house halfway between the family homestead and town, and soon they added 2 boys to the growing Irons clan. Henry, true to his nature, surprised everyone by announcing at age 18 that he wanted to join the army. It was 1896, and tensions were rising internationally. Ethan, who had seen war and knew its cost, struggled with this decision, but Violet reminded him that they had raised their children to make their own choices. "He needs to find his own path," she said, "even if it scares us." They sent Henry off with their blessing and their prayers, and Ethan wrote to him faithfully every week. Henry served honorably, and when he returned after his enlistment was up, he was a man changed by experience and responsibility. He used his military training to become a civil engineer and helped bring new roads and bridges to the Sierra Nevada region. As the new century dawned, Ethan and Violet found themselves in their 50s, their children grown and settled, their grandchildren numerous and boisterous. The house that had once seemed so large now overflowed during family gatherings, filled with the chaos and joy of multiple generations. On December evenings, when the snow fell outside and the fire burned bright inside, Ethan and Violet would often find themselves alone again. The grandchildren would have been collected by their parents, the house would settle into quiet, and they would return to their familiar spots by the fire, older now but still deeply in love. "Tell me the story again," Violet would sometimes ask. "About the day you found me." And Ethan would tell it, the details never changing because they were etched in his memory as clearly as on that day. He would describe the sound of the gunshot, the sight of her lying in the snow, the terror he had felt that he would be too late. He would tell of building the fire, of willing her to live, of the moment he realized she was not just a woman he had saved, but a woman he could love. "You gave me a future that day," Violet would always say when he finished. "You built me a fire and you built me a future." "We built it together," he would always reply. In 1905, on a crisp autumn day, Ethan and Violet stood on their porch and watched as yet another generation was christened Samuel's first grandchild, a boy named Ethan after his great-grandfather. The family had gathered for the occasion, and the house rang with laughter and conversation. Ethan pulled Violet close, kissing the top of her head. Her hair was fully silver now, and his was thinning and white. Their bodies bore the marks of hard work and time. But when he looked at her, he still saw the woman he had found in the snow nearly 30 years before, brave and beautiful and worth saving. "We did well," Violet said, surveying their family. "We did better than well," Ethan corrected. "We did what we set out to do. We built a life. We built a family. We built a future." That night, after everyone had left and they were alone in their bed, Violet turned to Ethan with tears in her eyes. "What is wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right. I was just thinking about my father, about how he died trying to give me a better life. And I was thinking that he would be so proud, not of the gold or the house or any of the material things, but of this family, of the love we created, of the legacy we are leaving. He would be so very proud." "He would be proud of you," Ethan said, "for surviving, for thriving, for becoming the woman you are." They held each other in the darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds and had made something beautiful from their second chance. The years continued to roll forward with increasing speed. They buried old friends and welcomed new babies. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin to have children of their own. The 20th century brought changes to Downieville. Automobiles appeared on the roads. Electricity reached the town. The world grew smaller and faster. But up on their mountain, time seemed to move at its own pace. Ethan still worked his claim, though more for the love of it than necessity. Violet still taught, though now her students were the great-grandchildren of her first pupils. Their love remained constant, a bedrock upon which everything else was built. In 1916, on a winter evening much like the one when they first met 40 years before, Ethan and Violet sat by their fire. They were in their 60s now, moving slower but still sharp in mind and spirit. Outside, snow fell softly, covering the world in white. "You remember being cold?" Ethan asked suddenly. Violet smiled. "Every day of my life before you, I was cold in one way or another. Cold with loneliness, cold with fear, cold with uncertainty. And then you built me a fire and I have been warm ever since." "I love you," he said simply. "I have loved you for 40 years and I will love you for however many more we have. And I love you, my cowboy, my hero, my home." They sat in comfortable silence as the fire burned and the snow fell. Two souls intertwined so completely that neither could remember what it was like to be alone. Outside, the world changed and rushed forward. But in their small corner of the Sierra Nevada mountains, in the house they had built together, Ethan and Violet Irons had created something timeless. The fire crackled. The snow fell. And two hearts that had found each other in the darkest moment continued to beat as one, a testament to the enduring power of love, of choice, of two broken people who had saved each other and built a future from the warmth of a single fire on a cold winter night. Years later, when grandchildren and great-grandchildren asked about their love story, Violet would always begin the same way. "I was dying in the snow, and your grandfather saved my life." And Ethan would always add, "She saved mine right back." And that simple truth, told and retold across generations, became the foundation of the Irons family legacy that love can bloom even in the harshest conditions. That one moment of compassion can change the course of multiple lives, that the greatest futures are often built from the smallest kindnesses. As they aged into their 70s, Ethan and Violet remained active members of their community. They were the elders now, the ones young couples came to for advice, the ones who had seen Downeyville through its boom and bust, and everything in between. Their children ran the businesses they had started. Their grandchildren were raising families of their own. And through it all, Ethan and Violet remained each other's constant companion. On their 50th wedding anniversary in 1927, the entire town turned out for a celebration in their honor. The church was decorated with flowers, despite it being December. A cake 3 layers high sat on a table groaning with food. 5 generations of Irons family filled the pews, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and even 2 great-great-grandchildren. Tiny babies swaddled against the winter cold. When it came time to speak, Ethan stood slowly, his joints stiff with age but his eyes still bright. He looked at Violet, who sat beside him in the dress Grace had made for the occasion, her silver hair swept up elegantly, her green eyes still sharp and full of life. 50 years ago, Ethan began, his voice carrying through the hushed church, I found a woman dying in the snow. I built her a fire because it was the right thing to do, because I could not leave another human being to freeze. I had no idea that in saving her life, she would save mine right back. I had no idea that this woman, this strong, brave, brilliant woman would become my wife, the mother of my children, the center of my world. He reached for Violet's hand, and she stood beside him, tears streaming down her face. Violet Zimmerman came into my life when I thought I was done with living, Ethan continued. The war had broken something in me, and I was just going through the motions. But she woke me up. She reminded me what it meant to be alive, to hope, to love. And every day for the past 50 years, she has continued to remind me. Violet squeezed his hand, then turned to address the crowd herself. My father brought me to California seeking a better life. He died trying to give me that gift. And for a long time I thought his death meant the dream died too. But then Ethan found me. He built me a fire to warm my body, and then he spent the rest of his life keeping that fire burning. He gave me a home, a family, a purpose. He gave me love beyond measure. And together we built the future my father dreamed of. She looked around at the assembled crowd, their children and grandchildren, the townspeople who had become extended family, the community that had embraced them. This is what love does. It multiplies. It spreads. One act of kindness on a snowy mountain road 50 years ago has led to all of this. 5 generations of family. A community strengthened by connection and compassion. A legacy that will continue long after Ethan and I are gone. The celebration continued late into the evening, with music and dancing and story after story told about the couple who had become legends in their own time. But eventually, as they always did, Ethan and Violet found themselves alone. They stood on their porch, the same porch Ethan had promised Violet when he proposed all those years ago, and looked out at the starlit snow. The mountains rose around them, eternal and unchanging. The river sang in the distance, its voice never silent. And between them flowed a love that had weathered every storm. 50 years, Violet marveled. It seems like both forever and no time at all. I would do it all again, Ethan said. Every moment, every trial, every joy, all of it just to end up here with you. I would too. Though maybe next time we could skip the part where I almost freeze to death. He laughed, pulling her close. Fair enough, though it did make for a good story. They went inside where the fire burned, where it had burned every night for 50 years, where it would burn as long as they had breath in their bodies. This fire that had started as an act of survival had become a symbol of their love, warm, enduring, life-giving. As they prepared for bed, moving through the routines established over decades of marriage, Ethan caught sight of their reflection in the mirror. Two old people, bent with age, white-haired and wrinkled. But when he looked in Violet's eyes, he saw the same woman he had fallen in love with. The same spirit, the same strength, the same beauty that had nothing to do with physical appearance and everything to do with the soul within. "What are you staring at?" Violet asked, catching his gaze. "The most beautiful woman I have ever known. Your eyesight must be going." "My eyesight is fine. I see you clearly, I always have." They climbed into bed, their bed in the house they had built, surrounded by the life they had created. Outside, snow continued to fall just as it had on the night they met. But inside they were warm, safe together. "Ethan," Violet said softly in the darkness. "Yes, love, thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for building me that fire. Thank you for giving me a future. Thank you for filling that future with more love than I ever thought possible. Thank you for choosing me every day for 50 years. And I will choose you every day for however many more we have." They fell asleep in each other's arms, as they had done thousands of times before. Two hearts beating in tandem, two lives so completely intertwined that they had become one story, one legacy, one enduring testament to the power of love. The years wound down gently for Ethan and Violet. They remained in their mountain home, refusing all offers from their children to move to town where care might be easier. This was their place, their sanctuary, the physical manifestation of the life they had built together. Here they would stay. Ethan passed first, in the spring of 1932, in his sleep with Violet beside him. He was 83 years old and had lived a full, rich life, beyond anything he could have imagined as that broken soldier who had come west, seeking only peace. His last words to Violet, spoken the evening before as they sat by their fire, were, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to love you." Violet mourned him deeply, but not desperately. They had been given 54 years together, which was more than many people ever got. She had his children and grandchildren around her. She had her memories, which were vivid and precious. She had the house he built, the life they created, the legacy they left. She lived another 3 years, surrounded by family, teaching almost until the end. When she passed in her sleep in the winter of 1935, at the age of 82, her family found her in her favorite chair by the fire, a smile on her face, looking peaceful and content. At her funeral, 5 generations of Irons family gathered once more. The oldest great-great-grandchild, now a young man of 21, stood to speak. "Our great-grandmother used to tell us a story," he began, "about how she was dying in the snow and our great-grandfather saved her life, about how he built her a fire and gave her a future. We heard that story so many times growing up that it became part of our family mythology. But as I got older, I realized it was not just a story about one moment on one winter day. It was about every day that came after. It was about choosing love over fear, hope over despair, connection over isolation. It was about building something that lasted." He gestured to the assembled family. "Look around. All of us exist because of a choice our great-grandfather made to stop and help a stranger. Because of the love that grew from that act of compassion. This is their legacy. This is what they built, not just children and grandchildren, though there are many of us, but a way of living, a commitment to kindness and courage and love that endures." Violet was buried beside Ethan on their mountain, on the spot where he had proposed to her so many years before. The headstone reads simply, Ethan and Violet Irons. He built her a fire. She gave him a future. Together they built a love that lasted forever. And on cold winter nights, when the snow falls on the Sierra Nevada mountains and the wind howls through the trees, some say you can still see a fire burning on that mountain. A fire that never goes out, built by a cowboy for the woman he loved, tended by their devotion across the years. A fire that represents hope and second chances and the transformative power of love. The house they built stood for many more years, home to their descendants, a place of gathering and celebration and remembrance. The businesses they started continued to thrive. The town they helped build carried on. And the story of Ethan and Violet Irons was told and retold, generation after generation. A reminder that the greatest futures are often built from the smallest acts of kindness, that love can bloom in the harshest conditions, and that one moment of compassion can echo through eternity. In the end, it was a simple story. A man found a woman dying in the snow. He built her a fire to save her life. She gave him a reason to live his. Together they created something beautiful and lasting. Together they proved that even in the hardest times, in the coldest winters, love can survive and thrive and become the warmth that sustains not just two people, but generations that follow. That was the legacy of Ethan and Violet Irons. Not gold or land or material wealth, though they had enough of those things. Their true legacy was love fierce and tender, passionate and patient, enduring and eternal. The kind of love that starts with a fire built in desperation and grows into a blaze that lights the way for all who come after. And so the story ends where it began, with a fire in the snow, with two people who found each other when they needed it most, with a love that built not just a life but a future that extended far beyond their own years. The cowboy saw her shivering in the snow. He built her a fire and a future. And in doing so, he found his own.